The glare of the fluorescent lights in the school hallway seemed to mock him, catching the polished gleam on Principal Albright's pointed shoes as she tapped them impatiently on the linoleum. Before her stood Arthur, his hands, knotted and scarred from a life she could never comprehend, resting calmly at his sides. He was just a janitor, an old one at that. In her world of spreadsheets, performance reviews, and upward mobility, he was a relic, a piece of old furniture that was no longer aesthetically pleasing. "Arthur," she said, her voice a sharp, polished weapon, "we have a parent-teacher conference this evening. I need this hallway to be immaculate. Not just clean, but sterile. Can you handle that? Or is it too much to ask?" He didn't flinch. He didn't offer an excuse or a complaint. He simply looked at her with eyes that had seen suns rise over landscapes she didn't know existed, eyes that had witnessed the very best and the absolute worst of humanity. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. "I'll take care of it," he said, his voice a low rumble like distant, forgotten thunder. She saw an old man in a janitor's uniform. She saw a stooped posture and a faint limp he carried with him like a shadow. What she didn't see, what no one saw, was a truth etched into the very fiber of his being, hidden beneath the worn fabric of his work shirt. They saw a janitor, but they were blind to the warrior. Welcome to a story that reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes, and true strength is often found in the quietest corners of the world. If you believe in the power of untold stories and the dignity of the human spirit, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell, because you won't want to miss what happens next. This is for everyone who has ever been underestimated, for every soul who carries their battles in silence. Arthur's life was a study in quietude and routine, a carefully constructed fortress of simplicity built to keep the ghosts of his past at bay. His small, two-bedroom house was impossibly neat, each object in its designated place, a reflection of a mind trained in precision and order. He rose before the sun, the first light of dawn finding him already in his kitchen, moving with a silent, deliberate economy of motion that belied the ache in his leg, a permanent souvenir from a place and time he never spoke of. His son, Leo, was the center of his universe, the bright, burning sun around which his own quiet planet revolved. He was 10, with his father's eyes and his late mother's smile. Arthur's life was entirely dedicated to him. It was why he had taken a job as a janitor at Northwood Elementary. Not for the meager paycheck, not for the thankless work, but for the priceless opportunity to exist within the same orbit as his son, to be a silent guardian in the background of his childhood. He would watch from a distance as Leo played in the schoolyard, a pang of love so fierce it was almost painful tightening in his chest. He would listen to the echoes of his son's laughter in the empty hallways after the final bell, a sound more precious than any metal. He made Leo's breakfast every morning, packed his lunch with painstaking care, and was always there, waiting by the school gates at the end of the day, a steadfast, unmovable presence in his son's life. He never missed a school play, a parent-teacher conference, or a soccer game, always standing at the back, away from the other parents, a silent observer who asked for nothing and offered everything he had. The other parents saw him, of course. They saw the janitor, the man who cleaned up their children's messes, and they offered him polite, distant nods, the kind of acknowledgement one gives to a piece of school equipment. They didn't see the man who had once held the lives of 20 men in his hands, the man who had memorized the intricate topographies of entire countries, the man who could navigate by the stars and speak in languages they had never heard of. They saw none of it, and that was exactly how Arthur wanted it. His past was a locked room, and he had long ago thrown away the key. Principal Diane Albright was the antithesis of Arthur's quiet world. She was a whirlwind of ambition, a woman who saw the world not as a place of people, but as a series of ladders to be climbed. Northwood Elementary was just another rung on her ascent to a district superintendent position, and she was determined to make her mark. She had arrived at the beginning of the school year, with a flurry of new initiatives, mission statements, and performance metrics. She spoke in a corporate jargon that left most of the seasoned teachers bewildered and exhausted. To her, the school was not a community. It was an asset to be managed, and its staff were resources to be optimized. From the moment she laid eyes on Arthur, she saw only inefficiency. She saw his deliberate, careful pace as slowness. She saw his quiet dignity as a lack of engagement. She saw his age as a liability. In her first week, she had called him into her office, a space that was as sterile and impersonal as her demeanor. She had a file on him, but she barely glanced at it. "Arthur," she begun, not making eye contact, instead tidying an already perfect stack of papers. "I've been reviewing custodial schedules. I believe we can increase efficiency by 30% with a more vigorous approach. I'll be providing you with a new set of protocols and a time checklist. We're aiming for excellence here at Northwood in every department." He had simply listened, his expression unreadable, and nodded when she was finished. He took the clipboard with a checklist and went back to his work, performing his duties with the same meticulous care as always, but now with the added indignity of her frequent, unannounced inspections. She would stand in the hallway, stopwatch in hand, a look of profound dissatisfaction on her face. The teachers watched these interactions with a growing sense of unease. Among them was Mr. Evans, a young history teacher in his first year out of college. He was idealistic and earnest, with a deep and abiding respect for the past and the people who had shaped it. He had been drawn to Arthur from the very beginning. He noticed things others missed. He saw the way Arthur's eyes scanned every room he entered, not with a casual glance of a cleaner, but with the trained, systematic sweep of a professional. He saw the impossible stillness Arthur could achieve, a state of being so calm it seemed to bend the air around him. Mr. Evans had tried to strike up conversations with the janitor, bringing up historical events, military history, anything to draw the quiet man out. "That's a nasty limp you've got there," he'd said once, trying to be casual as they stood in the empty library. "Sports injury?" Arthur had been polishing the wooden tables, his movements rhythmic and soothing. He paused, his gaze distant for just a moment. "Something like that," he'd replied, and the finality in his tone, though gentle, left no room for further questions. Mr. Evans, however, was not easily deterred. He was an observer, a gatherer of stories, and he felt, with an unshakable certainty, that Arthur was the most compelling story he had ever encountered. His respect for the old janitor was a stark contrast to the principal's open disdain, a silent battle of perceptions being waged in the hallways of Northwood Elementary. The inciting incident, the spark that would eventually set the entire school ablaze, came during a planning meeting for the annual career day. Principal Albright stood at the front of the library, addressing the assembled teachers with her usual brand of forced enthusiasm. She had a whiteboard covered in approved professions: doctor, lawyer, software engineer, marketing executive. It was a vision of success tailored to her own narrow specifications. "We want to inspire the children," she declared, gesturing to the board with a flourish. "We want them to see what's possible when you have ambition and drive." A younger teacher raised her hand. "My father is a carpenter," she said. "He built his own business from the ground up. The kids would love to see him work." Ms. Albright's smile tightened. "While admirable, we're trying to focus on professions that require a higher education this year. We need to set the bar high." It was in this atmosphere of professional snobbery that the humiliation occurred. As the meeting wound down, Ms. Albright was outlining the logistics for the event, delegating tasks. "And of course," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "we'll need the premises to be spotless. Arthur," she called out, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on him. He wasn't part of the meeting, but he was in the library, silently dusting the shelves in the back, a ghost in his own workplace. He stopped his work and turned his head, his expression neutral. Several teachers shifted uncomfortably. "Arthur, you'll be responsible for all the setup and cleanup. Extra tables, chairs, the works. And please, on that day, try to remain out of sight. We don't want to confuse the children about the kinds of careers we're celebrating." The insult landed with the force of a physical blow. The air in the room grew thick and heavy. Several teachers looked down at their laps, ashamed. Mr. Evans felt a hot surge of anger. He opened his mouth to speak, to defend the quiet man at the back of the room, but the principal had already moved on, her voice brisk and dismissive. Arthur's reaction was the most unsettling part of all. He didn't react. There was no flash of anger, no hint of shame. He simply held the principal's gaze for a long moment, a silent, profound stillness passing between them. Then He turned back to the bookshelf and, with a hand as steady as stone, he resumed his dusting. The quiet dignity of the act was a louder rebuke than any shouted words could ever be. Later that day, as Arthur walked home with Leo, his son was unusually quiet. "Dad," he finally asked, his small voice full of a hurt his father understood all too well. "Is being a janitor a bad job?" Arthur stopped walking and knelt, ignoring the sharp protest from his knee. He looked his son directly in the eye. "There is no such thing as a bad job, Leo," he said, his voice soft but firm. "There is only work that needs doing, and any work done with honesty and effort is honorable. Do you understand?" Leo nodded, though the doubt still lingered in his eyes. The principal's words had been a poison, and Arthur knew it. This was the beginning. Ms. Albright, emboldened by the lack of public opposition, escalated her campaign. The time checklist became a daily ritual. She would follow him, clipboard in hand, pointing out imaginary specks of dust, criticizing his methods, her voice a constant, grading presence. She was building a case, documenting his supposed incompetence, preparing to remove the piece of old furniture that offended her modern sensibilities. Mr. Evans watched the escalating harassment with a growing sense of outrage. He saw Ms. Albright's petty tyranny for what it was. The fearful bullying of a woman who couldn't comprehend a strength that didn't announce itself. His fascination with Arthur deepened into a protective respect. He started making a point of seeking Arthur out, offering a kind word, a cup of coffee, a simple gesture of solidarity that stood in stark defiance of the principal's agenda. It was during one of these quiet moments, in the boiler room where Arthur was taking his lunch break, that Mr. Evans saw it. Arthur had rolled up his sleeves to wash his hands at the utility sink, and for a fleeting moment, a patch of faded ink on his right forearm was visible. It was obscured by scars and weathered by time, but the image was unmistakable to a history enthusiast like Mr. Evans. It was a skull wearing a green beret, superimposed over a pair of crossed arrows and a dagger, the insignia of a U.S. Army Special Forces. Mr. Evans felt a jolt, as if he touched a live wire. The quiet janitor, the man being hounded by the principal for his supposed lack of ambition, was a green beret. Everything suddenly clicked into place. The limp, the 1,000-yard stare, the impossible calm under pressure, the methodical, almost tactical way he moved. It was the quiet professionalism of an elite soldier. Mr. Evans felt a profound sense of shame, not for Arthur, but for himself and everyone else who had looked at this man and seen only a janitor. He tried to research the symbol discreetly, cross-referencing it with historical military records, but without a name or unit, it was a dead end. These men, he knew, were ghosts. Their greatest successes were buried in classified files, their identities shielded from public view. He tried to broach the subject with Arthur, his approach clumsy with awe. I teach history," he stammered one afternoon. "Big admirer of the military. Especially the special operations guys. The Green Berets. Unbelievable courage." Arthur was sweeping the gymnasium floor, his rhythm unbroken. He didn't look up. "They're just men," he said, his voice even, "doing a job. But the things they did," Mr. Evans pressed, "the sacrifices they made, people should know. They should be honored." For the first time, Arthur stopped sweeping. He leaned on his broom and looked directly at the young teacher. His eyes were not cold, but they held a weight that Mr. Evans could feel in his bones. "The honor isn't in the knowing, son," Arthur said quietly. "It's in the doing, and in the coming home." The conversation was over, but for Mr. Evans, it was a confirmation. He became Arthur's silent ally, his one-man honor guard. He started documenting Ms. Albright's behavior, making notes of her public admonishments, the dates, the times, the demeaning language. He didn't know what he would do with the information, but he felt compelled to bear witness. He tried to speak up for Arthur in a staff meeting, questioning the fairness of the new, rigid cleaning schedules. Ms. Albright cut him off immediately, her voice sharp as glass. "Mr. Evans, unless you have a degree in facilities management, I suggest you confine your expertise to the history classroom. Your concern, while quaint, is duly noted and dismissed." The other teachers stared at their hands, their silence a testament to her power. Mr. Evans sat down, his face burning, but his resolve hardened. The battle lines had been drawn. The announcement of the school's annual Veterans Day assembly sent a new wave of tension through the halls. It was Ms. Albright's pet project, an opportunity for a grand, public display of patriotism that would look wonderful in the local newspaper and on her resume. She spoke of it constantly, her plans becoming more elaborate with each passing day. She wanted a full color guard, a student choir singing patriotic medleys, and a high-profile guest speaker. She was determined to create a flawless, moving tribute. It was in a planning meeting for this very event that she delivered her most calculated insult to Arthur. The meeting was, once again, held in the library. Mr. Evans sat in the front row, his jaw tight. "Our theme," Ms. Albright announced, "is service and sacrifice. We will be honoring the brave men and women who have served our nation. We have even managed to secure a truly incredible guest of honor, a decorated 4-star general who is a personal acquaintance of a board member. This will be an event to remember." She paused for dramatic effect, her eyes sweeping the room before landing, with pinpoint accuracy, on Arthur, who was once again working silently at the back of the room, replacing a burnt-out light bulb in a high fixture. "Of course," she continued, her voice laced with saccharine pity that was more insulting than outright scorn. "Service comes in many forms. While we honor our soldiers on the stage, let's not forget those who serve in humbler capacities. People like Arthur here." She gestured towards him with a patronizing wave. "His service to this school, cleaning our floors and taking out our trash, is a kind of quiet patriotism too, in its own way. He will be instrumental on the day of the assembly, ensuring all 500 chairs are set up perfectly and that the gymnasium is left spotless afterward. A crucial, if unseen, role." The silence that followed was thick with meaning. It was a public and deliberate act of diminishment, a clear message to everyone present. This man, this janitor, was not to be counted among the honored. He was staff. He was background. He was furniture. Mr. Evans could not stay silent. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Principal Albright," he said, his voice trembling slightly but clear. "I believe Arthur is a veteran himself. Shouldn't he be invited to sit with the other honored guests?" Ms. Albright turned her icy gaze on him. "Is that true, Arthur?" she called to the back of the room, her tone suggesting she was merely humoring a child. "Did you serve?" Arthur finished screwing in the new bulb and methodically lowered the ladder. He did not look at her. He simply said, "Once." The single word hung in the air, devoid of any detail, any pride. It was a stone wall, impenetrable. "Well, there you have it," Miss Albright said with a dismissive shrug. Turning back to Mr. Evans, "I'm sure his service, whatever it was commendable, but our honored guests are of a particular distinction. We have protocols to follow. Arthur has his duties. Let's move on." She clapped her hands together, a sharp, final sound that signaled the end of the discussion. Mr. Evans sat down, defeated but not broken. The dramatic irony was becoming almost unbearable. He knew that the man she had just relegated to chair-stacking duty was likely more distinguished than anyone who would be sitting on that stage. The assembly was no longer just an assembly. It was a ticking time bomb. The morning of the Veterans Day, assembly dawned crisp and clear, a perfect autumn day. The air inside the Northwood Elementary Gymnasium, however, was thick with a nervous, manufactured reverence. Red, white, and blue streamers hung from the basketball hoops. 500 folding chairs stood in perfect, silent rows, a testament to Arthur's methodical, pre-dawn labor. He had worked through the night, ensuring every corner of the vast room was immaculate, every chair perfectly aligned. He moved now through the slowly filling gym like a phantom, checking a cable here, wiping an imaginary smudge there, his presence so quiet and unassuming that most people didn't even register him. He was just part of the scenery, the silent man in the gray uniform who made things work. Leo found him near the stage, his young face a mask of worry. The whispers at school had not been kind. The other children, echoing the sentiments they'd heard from their parents and from the principal herself, saw his father as just a janitor. The shame, secondhand but potent, clung to the boy. "Dad," he whispered, Do you have to be here?" Arthur stopped what he was doing and placed a hand on his son's shoulder. The hand was steady, warm, and impossibly strong. He looked at the stage, at the empty chairs reserved for the honored guests, and then back at his son. "I do," he said simply. "There's work to be done." There was no bitterness in his voice, only a profound sense of duty that Leo could not yet understand. Just then, a low rumble from outside drew everyone's attention. A motorcade of black government cars swept into the school parking lot, stopping near the main entrance. Doors opened with quiet efficiency. Out stepped several stern-faced aides in sharp suits, followed by a man who seemed to command the very air around him. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his dress uniform a constellation of medals, ribbons, and stars that glittered in the morning sun. This was General Marcus Thorne, a four-star general, a living legend in military circles, a man whose name was spoken with a mixture of fear and awe at the Pentagon. His arrival sent a ripple of excitement through the crowd. Principal Albright, her face flushed with triumph, rushed to greet him, her hand extended. "General Thorne, an absolute honor to have you," she gushed. The general gave her a polite but brief nod, his eyes already scanning the area with practiced, sweeping gaze that missed nothing. He was looking for something, or someone. Mr. Evans watched from the doorway, his heart pounding in his chest. He saw the general's gaze sweep past the teachers, past the parents, past the stage, and then stop, locking onto the unassuming figure in the janitor's uniform standing quietly in the shadows at the back of the gym. A flicker of something, recognition, disbelief, reverence, crossed the general's stern face. The time bomb had started ticking faster. The assembly was about to begin. The gymnasium was filled to capacity, a sea of expectant faces. The student choir sang a heartfelt, if slightly off-key, rendition of America the Beautiful. The color guard, comprised of nervous high school ROTC cadets, marched in and presented the flags. Principal Albright took to the podium, beaming, basking in the glow of what she considered her personal triumph. She delivered a speech filled with well-worn platitudes about courage and sacrifice, her voice ringing with sincerity she did not possess. "Today," she announced, her voice resonating to the microphone, "we are graced with the presence of a true American hero, General Marcus Thorne." She gestured to the general, who sat on the stage, his expression unreadable, and the crowd erupted in applause. She let the applause die down before continuing, a self-satisfied smile playing on her lips. But heroism isn't always found on the battlefield or in the halls of power. Her gaze drifted, as if by accident, to the back of the gym, where Arthur stood by the doors, a silent sentinel. It is also found in the quiet, everyday service of ordinary people. People who do the thankless jobs without complaint. People who set up our chairs and clean our floors. Theirs is a different kind of service, a humble service, but a service nonetheless. Her words were a masterpiece of passive aggression, a final, public pat on the head for the old janitor. Mr. Evans clenched his fists. Leo, sitting with his class, shrank down in his seat, his face burning with shame. The general's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. Finally, it was the general's turn to speak. He walked to the podium with a powerful, measured stride that commanded absolute silence. He, a hand on his shoulder, and leaned in. "Let them," he whispered, "let them see what real honor looks like." The ovation continued for what felt like an eternity, a wave of respect and gratitude washing over the quiet man who had asked for nothing. The shame had been lifted, not from Arthur, but from everyone who had misjudged him. It settled squarely on the shoulders of the woman who stood alone and defeated, a silent testament to the fact that true authority is not taken, but earned. The applause eventually subsided, leaving a charged and reverent silence in its wake. The assembly was over, but the real lesson had just been taught. General Thorne gently guided Arthur toward a small, private office off the side of the gym, away from the prying, awestruck eyes of the crowd. Mr. Evans, feeling a surge of protective instinct, quietly stood guard at the door, turning away well-wishers and curious parents, giving the two old soldiers their privacy. Inside, the general turned to Arthur, his formal demeanor gone, replaced by the easy familiarity of a brother-in-arms. "Arthur," he said, his voice heavy with years of unspoken gratitude, I have a standing offer for you. The Pentagon. I can create any position you want. Instructor at the War College. Consultant for Special Operations Command. You name it. You don't belong here, cleaning floors. Arthur looked out the small window at the playground, where children, his son among them, were now streaming out for recess, their laughter stark contrast to the gravity of the conversation. He shook his head slowly. I do belong here, Marcus, he said, using the general's first name for the first time. My war is over. I fought it so he nodded toward the playground, would never have to. Being his father, that's my only mission now. It's the most important one I've ever had. The general studied his friend's face, seeing the unshakable peace in his eyes, and he finally understood. The world saw a hero wasting his talents. Arthur saw a father finding his purpose. I understand, the general said, clapping him on the shoulder. Just know, the offer always stands. When they emerged from the office, the hallway was still crowded. As Arthur appeared, a hush fell over the teachers and parents. They looked at him with new, profound respect. They parted for him as he walked, not out of fear, but out of reverence. He found Leo waiting for him, his son's eyes shining. They didn't need to speak. Everything that needed to be said had been laid bare in the gymnasium. Arthur simply put his arm around his son's shoulders, and they walked out of the school together, a father and a son, their bond reforged in the fires of public revelation. Arthur didn't glance back at Ms. Albright. He didn't need to. His vindication was not in her defeat, but in his son's pride. The next day, Arthur arrived at work at the same pre-dawn hour. He wore the same gray uniform. He carried the same set of keys. But everything had changed. The teachers greeted him not with a polite nod, but with a warm, "Good morning, Sergeant Major." The students looked at him with wide, wondering eyes. He simply nodded back, a small, quiet smile touching his lips, and went about his work. His honor had been restored, but his humility, the truest measure of his character, remained perfectly intact. The narrator's voice concludes, "True honor is not a metal pinned to a uniform or a story told on a stage. It is a quiet, internal compass that guides a person through life. It is the dignity in honest work, the courage in silent sacrifice, and the unwavering commitment to what truly matters." Arthur Jensen didn't need the world to see him as a hero. He just needed to be a father. What does true honor mean to you? Is it found in public recognition or in quiet, personal integrity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story moved you, please consider subscribing to our channel for more tales that celebrate the unsung heroes who walk among us every day. Thank you for watching.